we've got quite a week ahead of us with the new moon in Aquarius and a solar eclipse somewhere in the world. I think the energy of that, though, does affect the whole world. And just to say something quickly about eclipses is that I believe that in the the overlap that happens, there is a sort of a portal that opens, and it is really important to focus on our inner light during solar eclipses. So perhaps today, during this time, we can, sort of prep ourselves for this new moon solar eclipse, kind of, attune ourselves to what is it right now in Aquarius season to be focusing on. What is that inner light that we want to really cultivate during that solar eclipse. And Aquarius is a really interesting sign to me because it is an individual. It's about being an individual in community and in creating new communities and new forms of communities, and a kind of a new way of being, because actually it is fairly new for humanity as a whole to be individuals, to have that individual I, and then to be putting that into community in an intentional way. And we're certainly fumbling around with that a bit, I would say. So let's go ahead and start with the flower essence that is connected to Aquarius, which is water violet. And it's interesting because water violet is a remedy for people who are somewhat aloof, who like to keep themselves separate. And, last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about the Leo full moon, we were talking about this difference in more of like an Eastern path of spirituality, which does kind of create a feeling oftentimes of isolation or of separating yourself from society or asceticism, and the Western path, which is plugging yourself into the world and really creating that change in the world, which I think is really fitting, yes, for Aquarius and also for this water violet. And last week we talked a lot about, I keep saying last week, but 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about how when we're on a spiritual path, there is this feeling of sometimes of like ending up like putting yourself above other people, and how that is actually sort of a pitfall of being on a spiritual path. So anyway, it's interesting that now we're rolling right into the Aquarius topic in this Aquarius new moon, and of course being in Aquarius season, so there's a relationship across the wheel of stars between this Leo and this Aquarius, I think, in this way, at least how it came up for us, which is interesting. But here we go. This is the affirmation for water violet. It says, "My soul knows purity and containment. From this holy sanctuary, I seek connection. I recognize myself in the heart mirror of others. My gift is my presence in the world." And there's so much in this that is related to what we're going to talk about today. But again, it's like from this place, yes, of purity, containment, this holy sanctuary, from there, you're seeking connection. And your gift, so your service, what you give to the world, is in your presence in the world. So I just think that's a beautiful way to start this out with Aquarius of, making change and opening up to what is new and what is possible for humanity as a whole, not just for individuals, but as individuals creating it. I'm thinking about this inner purification and how that can make the space for healthy connection. And being present in the world is, yes, related to the change that the sign of Aquarius, the energy of Aquarius, is ready to usher in. But it must be through presence and actually being a part of the world that this can happen. which of course then requires this sort of constant back and forth of inner purification, because in being part of the world, I mean, you're faced with all of it. You're faced with anything in your own personal sort of astral emotional sphere that needs purification. You're faced with the collective, what needs purification, your karma from past lives. It all comes up. It all comes up from being in the world. And it's actually almost, in a way, or it definitely is, I would say, a more difficult path to forge that spiritual purifying, always like moving towards love and towards the light when you're walking in the world, than if you were to seclude yourself and kind of go that route. So the water bearer of Aquarius brings healing to the world, but the water must be purified first. That's something that I wrote down here. So we talked too, we're using this time also to explore the virtues according to Rudolf Steiner. And this is my own personal journey, actually, in doing this with you, to explore each of the virtues and how it relates. And it's been so interesting to see, yes, like how it relates to the flower essences, how it relates to my, previous understanding of these signs. And the one for Aquarius the virtue is discretion. And this virtue leads to the power of meditation. Discretion leads to the power of meditation. And I find this so interesting because, again, it's like that discretion, that's the purifying force, right? Like what needs to be transformed, what can stay, what must be kept at bay, and discerning these things for ourselves. And we are in the age of discernment. And what I have to say, especially coming from the place that I am, with like what I've seen and, the areas in which I've worked, especially, in the tarot sphere as I have over the years, is that we have to really, really examine the spiritual information, the paths, and the practices that we engage with. Because there's a whole lot of chaos out there. And I think that, this is part of it. This is part of our test. This is part of the time that we're in. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of influences. And we have this freedom to pick and choose what it is we let in and we take in. We're not just set on, okay, here is your certain path and this is all you can do. Not at all. Like, we're wide open and we're free. But the truth, yes, is there, but it's mixed up in all sorts of chaos and things that actually can lead us astray, which we're going to talk about later in a bit more detail. But I also wanted to read to you, it's interesting. I didn't even intend this when thinking about this series, but I find it to be relevant to look at the light on the path, which is something that I'm personally working with as we go, because it seems like the things we talk about actually line up in order so far with things from the light on the path. So, if it does work, then I'm going to bring it. So I felt the need today to check and say, okay, last time we talked about the rule number 5, which was kill out all sense of separateness. And that was really interesting. We talked about that with the Leo full moon. And so now I want to read to you 6 and 7, and they kind of go together here. So 6 is kill out desire for sensation. 7, kill out the hunger for growth. And here's the explanation. Yet stand alone and isolated, because nothing that is embodied, nothing that is conscious of separation, nothing that is out of the eternal can aid you. Learn from sensation and observe it, because only so can you commence the science of self-knowledge and plant your foot on the first step of the ladder. Grow as the flower grows, unconsciously but eagerly anxious to open its soul to the air. So must you press forward to open your soul to the eternal. But it must be the eternal that draws forth your strength and beauty, not desire for growth. For in the one case you develop in the luxuriance of purity. In the other you harden by the forcible passion for personal stature. So in thinking about this, discretion leading to the power of meditation, I'm especially looking at this passage from The Light on the Path by Mabel Collins, if I didn't say that earlier. Thinking about in first using your discretion as to, what is it that what path am I following, or what am I opening myself up to, or what are the forces in which, I'm setting my intention to then kind of move into a practice of meditation, or whatever the practice is that is to pull you closer to spirit or help you raise yourself closer to spirit. In that choosing, it's about choosing the one that, like the sun to a flower, helps it to grow and bloom on its own. So I'm just going to read that part of it one more time because it's just such a beautiful image, actually. Grow as the flower grows, unconsciously but eagerly anxious to open its soul to the air. So must you press forward to open your soul to the eternal, but it must be the eternal that draws forth your strength and beauty, not desire of growth. So oftentimes I think we might be drawn to things that feel like, oh, that's going to get me there faster. Like that practice or that path, that is going to help me manifest my goal, or that is going to help me develop my psychic ability faster. It's going to bring it here fast. And that's not necessarily, that desire for growth and that desire for, whatever it is, climbing the ladder, that self-development, which, yes, it can come from a good place in us, but it can be distorted into actually wanting whatever it is, the, material, or the status, these things that are actually not spirit, that are not love, and that actually, in taking something that could be, actually, it is a more direct path, but it might feel slower. But it's like, if you're setting your sight on what it is that is pure and true, then that will actually take you there in a more direct way. But it might not be the flashy thing, and it might not be the thing that feels like it's giving you that like spiritual high, for example. I've actually learned to be pretty cautious of the feeling of a spiritual high. And that has to do too with the things that sort of can pull us out of our path, which we'll talk about really soon. It's on my list to talk about that today. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there, being cautious of the things that feel like a spiritual high, and perhaps moving more towards the things that give you that sense of like a loving warmth instead of a spiritual high. So I've pulled an oracle card as well today. And it always amazes me how much it lines up. But in thinking about spiritual development in community, so with others, not just, family, like your community of who you're born into, but actually in developing this new form of who do you, like, from your free will, choose to be around, to interact with, to do your work alongside with, and that sort of a thing, community. And the oracle card that I pulled, and this is from the Mother Mary Oracle by Alana Fairchild, is Our Lady of Sacred Sisterhood. And I thought, oh wow, okay, yes, this is about connection with others. So I'm going to read to you this first part, and then I'm going to read to you the meditation that goes along with it. So I invite you, if you want to take this in as a meditation, it's very short, but you can find your comfortable space, whether that's like, physically finding yourself in a comfortable place to take it in, or finding that inward space in order to receive it, or both. But here, I'll read the first part first, and you can find your way there, and then I'll let you know when the meditation is about to start. Our Lady of Sacred Sisterhood. I manifest in spirit and in flesh. I am the love that falls from the stars and the light of the sun that gives life. I am the warmth in the hug from your dearest friend. I am the scent of the rose and the roar of the lioness. I am the tender care in the touch of your loved ones. I come to you now in physical form. I bring you the gifts of loving and being loved, of speaking and being heard. Gosh, that's so beautiful. When I was it's so funny how it's like a conversation. It always is. But how I was trying to describe, like, okay, instead of a spiritual high, it's like a loving warmth. And then here we have the very description of, like, yes, this is it. I am the scent of the rose and the roar of the lioness. I am the tender care and the touch of your loved ones. So that so beautifully answered that. Okay. So here's the meditation. Before you stands a person covered in a robe. You might not see them clearly, but you can sense their energy. Notice how you feel about this person. This person is significant to your experience of relationship in this lifetime. You may recognize them as someone you already know, or someone you are yet to know. You may sense that they are going to leave your life, or are about to enter your life, or have just entered your life. They have been sent by the Divine Mother to help you heal. It is most likely through comfort, but could also be through challenge that your healing occurs. Say the following prayer to that person now. I honor the light within you, and I honor the light within me. I ask that the mercy of Mother Mary temper our karmic connection and infuse it with her grace. May we both be healed. So be it. Notice if any further interaction seems to take place, or if the connection remains as it is for now. Whatever happens or does not happen is perfect for you at this time. When you are ready, complete your healing process with this affirmation. Sacred relationship nourishes me into new life. With gratitude, I open up and let go. Under the grace and protection of the Holy Mother, who loves me unconditionally. Wow. Yeah. So welcome back from that, if you went there into the visualization. I know I normally do this to sort of close out what we're talking about, but I feel sort of called to talk about the other flower now, because it's so funny. Like I put these things side by side, and I sort of know what I'm going to do, but it isn't coming from a place of like, oh, this will lead into this and this will go well. It sort of just happens as we do it, which is amazing. But the flower, so the water violet flower that we first talked about, that is one of the Bach remedies, the 12 healers, which have been placed alongside the zodiac. So water violet was placed next to Aquarius. And then I personally have been working with the 12 core heart remedies from Flower Essence Society, which, by the way, also is who writes these affirmations. And so I, on my own, sort of chose, okay, wait, which flower goes along with which one? And so next to water violet, I placed, out of the 12 core heart remedies, Forget-Me-Not. And this is actually a flower that I've been working with. And this has to do with soul connections. And this has to do with, remembering things from past lives. Kind of remembering your connection to spirit if you feel disconnected from it. So it also, I think the reason why I put it with water violet is this feeling of finding connection from a place of perhaps feeling disconnection. And so I'm going to read to you the affirmation for Forget-Me-Not. But I think it just goes so well with what we just received from that Mother Mary oracle card, about like that soul connection that's coming in for a reason right now, or has been with us for a reason, and perhaps we're letting it go. Either way. But here is the affirmation from Forget-Me-Not. The garment of my soul is threaded with memory. My soul weaves between the life of heaven and earth. I remember and cherish all my soul family. This love illumines my life on earth. This has come up a lot recently, actually, about who my soul connections are. And really, I mean, we're surrounded by soul connections and we're surrounded by people that we have karma with. But I think in terms of, we're talking about discretion and we're talking about discernment. It's like discerning who is here as a lesson or kind of like a karmic something to work out, and who is here as sort of a soul family that we are, destined to do work together and to be alongside, have like a similar mission in mind and like do work together. In the actual like, feeling of differences in those relationships, which of course could very much overlap, but also like on one hand, sometimes getting a little too entangled with things that we have maybe sort of karmic cloudiness or muddiness with could actually sort of slow us down. Is so having the discretion of like, okay, who is actually here to do work with me, and who is no longer like maybe I need to keep out of certain parts of my life for protection, actually. So that is something that's come up a lot for me actually recently in the last few months. So I've been working with Forget-Me-Not, and my original intention to work with it was in learning about past lives. And I think what's actually come of working with it, now that I'm really sitting here talking about it, has been actually about this discretion of like who's coming along with me in my work, or who do I need to kind of keep, maybe even keep, but like in a different area of my life, and what those kinds of differences and feelings of relationships are. So an example I have, actually, I had a friendship in the last few months that sort of, not in a terrible way, like it felt pretty peaceful, but pretty much dissolved. And it's interesting because I sort of came to it in a very different way than I have in the past with relationships, because although I'd felt very hurt by this person, by things that they had done, they were actually like really putting forth effort to make it right, and to, tell me the things that could make it right. But I realized in them speaking to me about it, that that's what it was. It wasn't actually the truth. It was like what can I say to make this right? Not actually like in their sort of, you know, it's like they're dealing with their own thing and their own past experiences and pain and all of that. And so they actually like gave me a lot of information in talking about it. And I saw it sort of actually kind of told on itself, where it's like, oh no, okay. This is actually, this for one, like this is why we were friends in the first, like why you wanted this friendship in the first place. And it doesn't actually have to do with valuing me. It has to do with other reasons. And in explaining this, you're kind of actually showing where you're not being entirely truthful. And but instead of like pointing out those things, I just sort of felt like, okay, you know what? This isn't mine to untangle. The loving thing to do actually is just to, you know, let that be yours. So I didn't really continue to engage with that or untangle it, or because I could really work with that person, but it actually felt like, no, like I actually think that in handing this back to you, that is the more loving thing to do. The other temptation that I had, which I think is how I would normally operate, is just to be like, actually, it's all fine. Like, don't even worry about it. You know, which I think the past version of me would feel like that's the loving thing to do, but actually it's not, because it isn't helpful for that person, you know? I hope that makes sense. But I feel like this is a really good time to talk about the two different directions that we can be pulled in, sort of out of our path. And this is why discernment is really important. Discretion becomes the power of meditation. I'm seeing that my interpretation of that at this time is discretion on our spiritual path really is what, I mean, it's what does the most, it's what has the most effect actually, because it's like if we're going to spend our time doing a certain practice, we need to kind of know what energy is that coming from within me, like why do I want to do it, and what stream is this in, like what type of what is this? So the sneakiest thing that I think can pull us out is actually spiritual attainment for self-gain. That's on one hand. And that's what we see a lot of in the New Age stuff. And again, it's like very well-meaning. It's like, of course, we all have desires. We all have things we want to like manifest in our life, like manifest, you know, or of course we have desires to grow spiritually, and that comes from a natural place, and that is, you know, partially a good thing. But it's like, but what are we doing that for? Because if it's for ourselves, if it's so that we feel like a master of something, or we gain some kind of status, or like whatever it is, or like we feel good about ourselves, that can become that thing of like sort of separating yourself almost, like, oh, the other people who don't know about these things, you know what I mean? And in that, again, water violet would be helpful for that. Lotus, which we talked about in the last stream, it's so interesting how connected they are. I'm glad we're doing the full moon next to the new moon now, because wow. And yeah, so that's really easy to do if we're on our spiritual path for self-gain. That's one of the sides. That's one of the pitfalls. That's one of the things that can pull us off. The other side, which, you know, this is, I would think it's like, it's the polarity, right? So it's the other side. It's something that we're actually dealing with a lot in the world and in sort of society, and how it's going, and how an understanding of the world and like scientific materialism is developing. So we do encounter this all the time, even if we are spiritual. I mean, everyone's a spiritual being, but like if we're on a spiritual path. And this other side is basically a denial of the spiritual world, and a feeling that like the material, what we can see and what we can sense in the world is all that there is. And this is the side actually that worships money and power, because it's not that you don't have a God, it's that you've misplaced it, actually, which is what's interesting. This is the side that worships money and power. And there's a lot of destruction that can come with that, and that's sort of what we're seeing in the world, and that's what we're facing in the world. So those are kind of the two different sides. One is spiritual attainment for self-gain, and the other is like total denial. And then there's the sort of middle path, like finding the middle, which has to do with, yes, acknowledging this higher force and moving ourselves towards it, but not for the sake of self, but for the sake of being in service. So we have here a new moon in Aquarius journal prompt. If you want to get your journal, you could write it down for later if you would like, or get started on it. And also a deck of cards, because we also have a card pull. So this new moon is upcoming. We're prepping for it. It's going to be on Tuesday. And this, has a lot to do, I think, in a practical way, this prompt, with how we can put ourselves and our gifts, our capacities, in service of others, in service of the new communities that we are building, in a way, however that means to you. So it's important to, number one, acknowledge the gifts and capacities that you have as real and as valuable. And then number two, it's important to put them into service instead of self-gain. So here we go. Our prompt for the new moon in Aquarius is, in what ways do you talk the talk but not yet walk the walk? Do you complain? Do you wish for change? Note some of the frequent things you talk about or think about. Is there something that you value highly and wish for in the world that you can begin to offer the community around you? What is the first step you can take this moon cycle? And our card pull is, what is something I value and could be living more fully? So for myself, with the card pull question, I pulled the Knight of Swords in reverse. And I'll share with you a little bit about what I wrote down here. So what is something I value and could be living more fully? And with the Knight of Swords in reverse, it's interesting because it's almost like a double negative that's happening here. But what I'm saying is speaking not for self-gain. Because I think of that with the Knight. The Knight has a lot of sort of like ego and like self-mastery and it is a more like self-oriented archetype. The Knight can be, and then also can become, the potential for the Knight is to become like a helpful, like selfless hero, really. So that's possible. And then of course the swords being in the air, the sign of air, which is also Aquarius too. So then I made a list here, which is, well, how do I speak for self-gain? And I guess what I mean is, like, how do I use my words in ways that actually it's not because I'm trying to help and transform things around me, it's for other reasons that have to do with centering myself. And so I made a very honest list, and I'm just going to share it with you. These are ways that I do, and these are ways that I can work on. So to not feel awkward is the one that I wrote down. So to fill the space. Oversharing or overanalyzing with myself at the center. So kind of talking about myself, like overly, like talking about my experiences and like wanting to analyze them, but maybe it's actually like, oh yeah, I want this conversation to be about me. Maybe that's actually behind it. To prove that I know something. I mean, sometimes I have this sort of like an imposter syndrome sort of a feeling, or like I need to like kind of like prove that I can hang in a conversation, you know what I mean? To satisfy an intellectual inquiry that lacks a living experience. And I think this is something, as we're coming out of the age of the intellectual soul and towards the age of the consciousness soul, yeah, like this is something collectively too that we're dealing with, but I certainly see it in myself. And here's one I've really, really been working on this one, and this one's actually pretty hard. Gossiping to satisfy an annoyance and see if other people feel similarly. Like, it's really hard. If I feel annoyed by something, or if I feel like I have to get that validation of like, yeah, someone, or like get off of like, this is, this, we feel similarly, it's like something about that. So I've really, really been struggling with this one. And actually, by struggling, I mean, actually, like I have definitely made progress with this one, but sometimes I realize like, oh, there are certain people where that's just the pattern that they fall into. Nothing against them. I've been there. I've done that. But it's actually difficult to stand in this and be in conversations where like maybe in the past, actually, we have spent a lot of time talking about other people, just to be honest. And then what I also wrote down was white lies for convenience's sake. And I realized that I've really also been working on like being more truthful, or being truthful, just like always telling the truth. And realizing how many white lies is just so easy, and how often, like I probably like didn't even realize how much I would do that. Just like kind of tell a white lie for whatever reason is convenient. Maybe it even is simply because like, oh, like the other way I would have to like explain far too much, and it's easier just to say this. Or like, oh, I'm trying to get out of something, but actually it's because I'm like lacking the boundary, or lacking, you know what I mean? So it sort of exposes a lot if you take away the option of a white lie. And that's just my list so far. So hopefully, I was just like, let's be really honest. So hopefully this is something helpful and something that, many of us can relate to. So then I wrote, I can give to the community myself, standing in my higher self, and always being truthful. And I think just doing that really, that can do a lot. And in a way, that's the first step. So that's where I'm at with that. And that's what I interpreted the Knight of Swords in reverse as, just to give you a feel for how, a way to work with this journal prompt and the card pull. So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I definitely see the relationship of all of it. And yeah, it's like we're in this time of great change in the world, and we're rethinking how the world can operate. But it really starts with the very communities that we surround ourselves with, and what new possibilities of health we can create within them. And it starts with ourselves, actually. It starts with that inner work. And that's why I love Aquarius, how it has both the individual and the community. So it's the individual within the community. And what is that? What does that mean? So yeah, thanks for talking about Aquarius. And happy upcoming new moon. And keep your light shining bright this solar eclipse on Tuesday.